Hi there. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at a small community in Ross County just west of Chillicothe called Roxabell. And we're going to use an 1800s map of Roxabell and compare that to a Google Maps satellite imagery of today and kind of compare and contrast the two and see what we can come up with as far as the history of the community and uh, kind of use modern technology, even though it may sound a simple exercise, use modern technology like Google Maps to come up with and be our own geographer and historian, as it were, uh, which is quite nice this day and age that we can have this technology at our fingertips virtually whenever we want on our smartphones or tablets or computers. So we're going to take advantage of that today and we'll look at one little small community. And this here is a plat map of Roxabell in Concord Township in Ross County in 1860. And this actually comes from an 1860 atlas of the county. And this was sent to me by a gentleman on social media who thought I might be interested in this. So let's take a look at this and dive a little deeper into it. Maybe most notably, we can see the railway lines going right through here. And this is the M&C, or the Marietta and Cincinnati. And this name may ring a bell if you follow me or know some history of Southern Ohio. And this was actually the railway line that passed through Athens and Benton County on its way to Ross County and Roxabell, but passed through places like King's Switch or King's Tunnel, Ingham Station, and the Moonville Tunnel, believe it or not. So you can trace this line back east through all of those places and ultimately to Marietta itself, and then Cincinnati to the west. And this was the first connector of transportation really across in a east-west fashion across Ohio, albeit in the southern part of the state. The canals had already come, the Ohio and Erie Canal and the Hocking Canal had already been built by this time and connected almost the Ohio River all the way up to Lake Erie. So the state had been bisected in a north-south fashion for transportation, but not in an east-west as of this time. So this was a very new thing for people of Southern Ohio to be able to travel westward to Cincinnati. Prior to this, it would have taken days, whether it was on the Ohio River or across land, if not longer. So we can see here, the Marietta and Cincinnati comes right through the southeastern portion of Roxabell. And Roxabell itself was founded in about 1854. And it appears because the M&C was founded in 1850 and took some years afterward to be built up and actually be completed. It is my theory that this place actually formed from this transportation hub, just like Canal Winchester did, very similarly, because it was connected to the canals and then ultimately to the railroad some decades after that, as they kind of grew and developed. And Canal Winchester was virtually plotted out by the people that owned the land and thought it a good place since it set on the transportation main line, as it were. You could almost think of it, too, as a modern kind of roadside rest area, gas station, fast food place you could find on any interstate exit ramp. So this is kind of the same principle here, but just in, say, circa 1860. So as we can see here too, we have double track here, and this was something back in prior to the Civil War, before really telegraphs were used in railroading, and obviously before the telephone. There's no real way to communicate between trains and between depots and stations. So this would have been a precautionary things, so there would be no incidences and no collisions through trains passing on the main line going eastward or westward. A train could pull over into the siding and stop at the station here at the depot and let people out, and as we can see, there's a hotel right next to it. So this would have been a safe way to let people off and on a train, or even stop if you have a goods train and let another train pass. So this was actually a precautionary thing more so than anything here. But as we can also see, there's a steam mill and all of these other black dots here we see mainly from Main Street southward, and all of these are actually structures or buildings. So we can see a lot of the development happened in the southern part of the community, and predominantly this was because the railroad passed down through here, and there's the steam mill and the hotel, and so there was a lot of businesses in this area because it was close proximity to travelers. So it makes good sense that there would be a lot of building going on down here first before it would be in the northern part of the plots. But as you can see, there was high aspirations for Roxabell in 1860. A lot of these are still empty. There's no dots on them, so that we know there are no structures here. But you can see there's quite a number of plots that were going to be sold here. And we can see through Main Street, too, a lot of smaller ones. And this would have been for communities, for groceries or other businesses to develop and kind of face each other, just as any common small town Main Street is, or even larger Main Streets are. Examples would be Nelsonville or Athens. Just drive through some of the main thoroughfares on these streets and you can see how buildings face each other. Just classic kind of town and city construction. But as we can see, nothing aside from 3 little dots here, 3 structures on the far west side of town. That's all so far. So it's struggling in its first handful of years, but it's still doing a decent amount of growing here, as I said, down here by the M&C Railway. But let's take a look at Roxabell and now in 2018 and see if it developed or if it didn't develop. And right off the bat, we can see here it really did not develop, or it did not develop into a long-lasting community. Although it still is a community. We have a Baptist church here, but there is no businesses, to my knowledge, that are open in Roxabell. I've never been to this small little community, but from a little bit of information I could find, there was really nothing going on here aside from the few people that do live here have to commute elsewhere, probably Chillicothe, for work or for groceries or really anything, because there's no really infrastructure of Roxabell. The railway line closed in the 1980s, about the same time as it did in Moonville and the communities around Athens and Benton counties as well. So with this line not being used, we can see that it's actually grown up, and we can see the trees have taken over, which is kind of ironic, isn't it? Because we don't see a lot of trees around railroads because they are, whether they're sprayed to discourage growth or they're just cleared out from trees overgrowing and what have you. So this is kind of an ironic picture, isn't it, from the air that we can really see this. And if we zoom out more, we can actually see the entire arch of the railway line going there. But this is kind of an imprint, though, an historical imprint, isn't it? Because this line actually was built in the 1850s and was used until the 1980s. So for over 130 years, this line was active. And even over 150 years later, essentially, we can see this imprint still on the landscape. So this is a very kind of fascinating thing here to be able to see the kind of the transportation history still here for us to view, but albeit via satellite imagery. But Roxabell itself, as I said, didn't really grow. And by the early 20th century, a lot of the passenger trains had already ceased on this line, which was the Baltimore and Ohio Southwestern, and then ultimately, I believe, CSX before it closed. But let's take a look and see its proximity to Chillicothe and its modern thoroughfares of travel, the highways and such, and see why Roxabell hadn't grown since. So let's switch over here to a full satellite image of Google Earth. And we can see Chillicothe down here, and we can see Roxabell over here, and it's apparent that there's nothing really going on around it, is there? There is a lot of farm fields, and we can see 35 and 50 going in the northwest and southwest directions out of Chillicothe. So the main thoroughfares of travel nowadays, being the automobile and trucks, we don't see any going through Roxabell. So this is an apparent reason as to why Roxabell never grew, because for the last several decades that the automobile has taken over American transportation, it's obviously apparent that there would be no need for gas stations and no need for grocery stores or anything else in Roxabell, because there is no need for it. There's no need for growth. There's no connection to, I guess, transportation or society through here. So it's kind of an interesting look. By using satellite imagery, we're able to see within perspective of the greater Chillicothe area here in a greater urban area why a place like Roxabell did not grow into the 20th century and ultimately still grow today. So I hope you found this a little interesting and intriguing, and maybe it will encourage you to use Google Maps or whatever application you may have on your smartphone or computer and do some investigating yourself. If you have any questions, try and seek some answers. But always, as always, if you have any questions for me or ideas, always contact me on Facebook or on my YouTube channel, the Ohio and Appalachian History Geographer, and I'd be happy to help you and happy to cover it for this page. So, till next time, I hope you take care.